Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and okay, my story with Clancy is, and I have it here in one of my recordings where I celebrated a birthday, and then during my talk at the beginning of the meeting, I said that it was my first attempt in 1985 to get sober, and it didn't take, of course, because I came back in 94. And I told Clancy I was living in Stockton, and I heard Clancy was going to come to speak, and I thought to myself, I don't need to hear this guy, Clancy. So I did go to the convention or the meeting or wherever it was he was speaking. So Clancy gets up to start talking. He says, Dave, are you still here? I says, yeah, I'm right here. He says, you know, we held that meeting up for 15 minutes waiting for you. So there's my Clancy story. Take care and have a good day if you want to. I know I will.
My name is Clancy Imislund, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm a member of the Pacific Group in Los Angeles, California, and I've been sober since October 31st, 1958. And except for that goof up there in the yellow shirt who had 59 years, I could be an old-timer tonight. But I was surprised to see so many people stand up who are in their first year, because you might not know exactly what all this to-do is about. I didn't at the end of my first year. But 82 years ago today, Dr. Bob had a hangover, and he wasn't feeling very good, and his hand shook. And he had to do some surgery at the hospital. And he had postponed it twice already, apparently, and had to do it today. And he told his new friend, Bill Wilson, I can't handle a knife. So his friend Bill Wilson got him some beer. That settled him down remarkably well. And he went off to do the surgery and did it well, we hope. We never heard how it came out. But he was going to be home at 2 o'clock, and then he wasn't there, and then wasn't there at 3 o'clock, and wasn't there at 4 o'clock, and wasn't there at 5 o'clock. And at 6 o'clock, the door burst open, and here's Dr. Bob, cold sober. And Bill says, where the hell have you been? And Dr. Bob says, while I was doing that surgery, I remember in the Oxford movement, they talk about making amends to people. And I never thought a doctor should have to make amends, but I realized I was a human being before I was a doctor. So I've been all over Akron today making amends to people, and I feel wonderful. And that was June 10th, 1935, and neither one of those two guys ever drank again. That's why this is our anniversary. One of the nice things in being an old-timer, or kind of an old-timer, is that I may be one of the few people in the room that's spent much time with Bill Wilson. In 1963, I was 5 years sober, and I got sent to New York to get some papers signed so they could do some work, and I got them done right away. And I got up the next morning, I thought, what will I do today? I think I'll go over to the World Service Office and see Bill Wilson. So I went over to the World Service Office. I said, I'd like to see Bill Wilson. The girl said, I'm sorry, he's booked up every hour for the next 2 weeks. If you want to come back in 3 weeks, I can get you in. I said, well, I won't be here in 3 weeks. So I kind of drifted off into the archives, and I looked at some pictures and letters written by the founders and so on. And all of a sudden, here comes Bill Wilson. He said, are you the young man who wanted to see me? I said, yes, sir. He said, well, my 11 o'clock didn't come in. You want to join us? Join me? I said, you bet, Bill. So we sat in his office and talked for an hour. And do you know what he said? I don't remember. Just some more of that AA crap. But I had a great sense of history. In 1960, I went to the International Convention held in Long Beach and heard Ebby give his only talk he ever gave at the convention. And I heard Sister Ignatia. And that was beautiful, because I'd been in and out of AA for years, and I knew all about these people, but I never thought I'd be sober long enough to hear them. And I heard Sister Ignatia talk, and I was so thrilled by when she talked about when these people had called her at the hospital and said, do you have anybody there that needs talking to about alcoholism? And she said, yes, I do, and told him about the guy she had. And it was so like living history. And I rushed up on the stage after her, and I shook her hand. I said, that was great, Sister Ignatia. And then I was overcome, and I kissed her. Now, Jesus, maybe you shouldn't kiss a nun. I'm a Lutheran, how do I know? And so I said, is it all right to kiss a nun, Sister Ignatia? And I think she said, as long as you don't get in the habit. I don't remember exactly. That's 60 years ago. But so I come before you as a historical personage. And I'm very pleased that I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous and have been since Halloween 1958. The speaker this morning has been, or this afternoon, has been sober since Halloween 1978. And I try to help him as much as I can. And it's a wonderful feeling. My last day of drinking, that's what I want to talk about a little bit. I woke up on Skid Row in an all-night theater. And I don't know if you know much about all-night theaters on Skid Row. They're pretty scurvy. And at midnight, the ticket prices drop from 25 cents to 15 cents. And that gets all the bums off the street. You have a place to go and sleep. And it was raining that night, so it was a full house. But they really don't run all night, these all-night theaters. Guy comes in at 5 o'clock in the morning and says, all right, you bums, everybody out! And the guy comes in with a hose and starts hosing down, and we all just shamble out into the street where it was still raining. And I didn't know a soul in Los Angeles. I thought, what the hell am I going to do? And some guy said, do you want to sell a pint of blood? I said, that's exactly what I want to do. And we went about 5 blocks up 4th Street to the blood bank, had us come in, took a drop of blood out of our ear. I couldn't take it out of my mouth because I just had my front teeth, my upper front teeth kicked out in the Phoenix drunk tank because I inadvertently vomited on somebody's bunk, and he wasn't nice about it. But anyway, they took the blood out of our ear, and we sat and waited for him to come out. He finally came out and said, who is Imislund? I said, I am. He said, you don't have enough iron in your blood to sell a pint of blood here. Oh, I said, come on, for Christ's sake, I'm so sick. Just a cup of coffee, maybe, just a roll or something. Can't help you, pal. You can't sell blood here. I said, what the hell am I going to do? He said, down here about 4 blocks, there's a place for bums like you. It's called the Midnight Mission. Go down there, it's about breakfast time. Go down there and get some breakfast. I said, all right. I went down there 4 blocks in the rain. And I go in and said, I'd like some breakfast, please. The man said, sorry, We just got done serving. We have no more food. Come back at noon, we'll give you lunch. I said, I can't make it till lunch. Jesus, how about just a roll or a piece of bread or something? Can't help you. And I grabbed him by the lapels. I said, come on! And the guy stepped over, they threw me out the door. And the guy said, go down here about 4 blocks. There's something called the Midnight Mission. They're designed for bums like you. So I went down to the Midnight Mission. And I said, I'd like some breakfast, please. He said, we're all done serving. And I grabbed his lapel. And these 2 guys stepped over, undid my hands. I just talked to you about that. And threw me out the door and said, stay away, you funny bastard. And I wanted to tell him, I'm not a phony bastard. 3 years ago, I was on the faculty of the University of Texas. I staged a grand opera for the University of Texas. I wrote in my heyday, you have to be old to remember, but what Elsie Delmer, the Borden cows said, they had, and their calves, what they said in Dallas, and I had a terrible time. And I said, I've had my picture on the front page of the New York Times once upon a time. I'm not a phony bastard, but it's really hard to explain these things in midair. Yeah. So I stood outside the Midnight Mission. If some guy would have come up to me this morning, dawn was just breaking, he might have said, you better do something about yourself, kid. You're dying on the street. Your wife and children, you never see them again. Your parents don't want anything to do with you. You've lost everything in your career. You're a bum on the street. He said, all the money and clothes you have are in a car that you lost in Phoenix. You hid it so well you could never find it. He said, you better do something about it. And I said, I don't want to hear that crap, I might have said. One thing I learned about my years about AA, in and out, all over, was that if you really get sick and down and out, you can always go to an AA club. They got to take you in. So I said, where's an AA club around here? My mouth started bleeding. And the guy said, there's no AA club downtown now. There's one at Wilshire and Fairfax, 6300 Club. They'll take you in. I said, okay, how do I get there? He said, well, you go up the street to Hill Street, cut over to Wilshire, turn right, and walk till you come to Fairfax. And on the corner is the club. That doesn't sound bad, does it? 7.5 miles in the rain. And I got to the club, and I didn't want to go in because there was some boob in the doorway. Say, welcome home, son. I thought, screw you. But I went in, I went around him and went in. And that was my sobriety date. I had no idea that it would be my sobriety date. I had no desire to stop drinking. I knew I wasn't an alcoholic, and I knew all about AA. What the hell were they going to do for me? I hung around the club, and the manager came over and said, you're in pretty bad shape. You got any place to sleep? I said, no. He's out here in the parking lot. He's a 49 Merc. Guy from Laguna Beach left it there this summer. It doesn't run, but you can sleep in it, get out of the rain. I said, thanks a lot. So when nighttime came, I slept in that abandoned car. I didn't know it was going to be my home for months to come. And the next day I went to the club and hung around and drank free coffee, and I tried to think what I could do. And the manager came over and said, you know, kid, he said, you're okay in here today and tomorrow, Sunday. But during the week, you got to be a member of the club. You won't be able to come in Monday morning. I don't know what to do about that. And so I sat there all day Sunday. And he came over and he said, I've been watching you. I got a feeling if I make you stay outside Sunday, you're going to die. And I'll have to fill out all those papers. So you can come in, but with 3 rules. You can't ask anyone for money, which you've already done. None of your sarcastic, smart-aleck remarks, which you've already offended several people. And you have to go to a meeting every night in the club. I thought, God, that sounds like cruel and unusual punishment. But I did that. And I slept in my car that night. And I came in and spent the day. And at night, I went to the meeting in the club. And milled around. I was hungry and sick. Somebody brought in a tray of sliced cake for the meeting. And I had about 4 pounds of that. And tided me over. And I sat in the meeting on gratitude. And I almost puked the cake up again. Jesus. I don't want to hear this baloney. And then I slept in my car and I was cold. And next day I went to the club. And that night there was another meeting. And I went to that. And nothing happened. I just the same old AA crap all the time. And Wednesday, I spotted somebody in that meeting who I'd seen in a movie. I thought, ha, a movie actor. What does that tell you? He's got money. And I kind of sidled up to him, and I knew he probably needed a sponsor. So I said, do you have a sponsor? He said, yes, I do. And he didn't seem to respond to my advances, so I just started to screw him. But by Friday, I knew I was going to die. I was going to die that weekend. I could not shake it loose. And I knew I was an alcoholic, and I was so sick, and I had nowhere to turn. Every direction was an unfriendly direction. And by this time, I was desperate to do anything. I saw this actor again, and I whipped out one of my few arrows, broken arrows that I hadn't used yet. I went over to him, I said, Bob, you know, I admire your program so much, and I'm just entranced by what you're doing. Would you be my sponsor? He said, all right, but I want you to do exactly what I tell you. Oh, sure, Bob. I thought I'll have his, he was dumb. I would have his wallet in my coat by the time I leave town tomorrow night. I never did get any money off the old fool. He bought me meals. He bought me scrambled eggs and soup, things like that I could chew without teeth. And we worked out a deal finally. He would call the mission, he would call the club. I'd be lurking in there and say, get the kid out of the corner, 6:30 tonight, I'll pick him up. So he'd come up at 6:30, the big Lincoln, and I'd jump in his cab. He'd take me to some restaurant, give me some more soup, and then he'd take me to a meeting where he was speaking. He spoke a lot, and I listened to him speak every night. I could give his damn speech better than he could. And the only thing wrong with the deal was that on the way back to the club, to my abandoned car, he would give me a sermon on God. And I just couldn't stand that. Because I believed in God, but I hated God. It went back to the 1950s when I was doing well. And I got into a kind of a pattern. Whenever I drank too much, I would go out in the street and harass a cop. Dumb thing to do. But I got thrown in for disorderly conduct several times. And you get out at 6 o'clock in the morning, hurry home and get a shower, go to work. And one morning I came out and one of my neighbors was there. And I was humiliated. I said, what the hell are you doing here? And I came down to give you a ride home. I said, you don't have to do that. That son of a bitch of a cop, I got his badge number, and I'm going to make it tough on him. He said, I don't know about that. But while you were out drunk last night, we couldn't find you, and your little boy died. Oh, God. That's about the worst news I ever got. I had 4 little girls and 1 little boy, and the little boy just died, and I was drunk in jail. And we took him up to Wisconsin and buried him in a little country churchyard next to his grandma. And I took a vow in his casket. I said, John Imislund, this will never happen again. This will never happen again. I love you and I love your sisters. And I went back to Texas and I quit drinking. I didn't go near AA because AA makes me want to drink. But I quit for the first time in a long time. I came home at night after work and would eat with the family, help the kids with the homework, just like a regular person. And I felt good about that. And there's one thing wrong. Over the years, I have been always able to quit drinking. That's one of the reasons I know I'm not an alcoholic. People talk, as was said in one of our, I want to say just in passing, last night and this afternoon, we had as good 2 talks as I've ever heard in AA. Bob and Sheldon and Bob. And good God, good AA boys. But at any rate, I got out of jail and I went home. I could always quit drinking. I noticed that over the years. Whenever my remorse level gets high, I quit drinking. And I can quit. It's no big deal. I'm not like these alcoholics who just go crazy. I could quit. The only problem is after 3 or 4 days, I feel bad. And I realize, as Bob says, I'm surrounded by idiots. And I especially felt that in Texas, where they really were idiots. And I got very bad. On Tuesday, I was desperate, tense, and Wednesday was worse. Thursday, I got through the day, and I thought, I'll last till the week. And on Friday, I got up, and I was just crazy. I needed a cup of coffee. And I got to the kitchen. I said, I'm going to get some coffee. And there was no coffee. And there's a note on the table. I've taken the girls to church. I thought, oh, for Christ's sake. You look around me and the world is full of crapheads. I hate my job. I hate my family. I hate this town. And I had a desire to kill myself. So I'm unlike the other speakers. I followed through on it. I went to the garage and hooked up a hose on the exhaust pipe and into the car. And you do that so the motor won't die. And I got in the car and started the motor and died. A successful suicide. And the neighbor next door was watching all of this from his breakfast nook. And they saw the motor running and I didn't get out, so he walked over there and found me dead in the car. And they pulled me out. And he banged on my chest, and he got the emergency staff there. And they got me going again. But they took me and locked me up in the mental hospital. And they got me back to shape again in about 3 days with oxygen and so on. And then they decided, why would a guy do that? So they gave me some mental tests. And they came to the conclusion that I was terribly emotionally unkempt. I was goofy. And so they committed me for an indefinite period up to the rest of my life in the Texas State Insane Asylum at Big Spring, Texas. That's how I get when I quit drinking, folks. That's how I know alcohol is not my problem. Alcohol is the only defense I have against a shitty world. And I'll tell you, let me give you some advice. if you got to go to the nut house, go to a big city nut house. Don't go to little towns, because they get their attendance from the area. And I remember the first night I was in the nut house, I just got to sleep, and I heard, but fortunately, you get used to the nightly scream. And they saw in my record that earlier that year, I had staged a grand opera at the University of Texas. So I was appointed director of the Christmas pageant at Big Spring State Hospital, where it wasn't terribly difficult. You're just trying to keep the three wise men off the Virgin Mary if you possibly could. Oh. And I got through that. And one of these big attendants came over one day and says, "You seem to be getting a little restless, boy. Don't ever try to escape. This is an escape-proof hospital." "Oh, is it?" "Oh." And I had a new goal shimmering. It took me about a week or two to find a way to get through a door and down a corridor and through another door, across the yard and over the fence. And I was gone. And once I got out, I realized it truly was an escape-proof institution. But you don't know till you get out. I don't know if you've been in West Texas, but they can see you running for 3 days out there, just flat. Well, there goes that little Yankee sumbitch now. They brought me back and gave me 2 months of electric shock treatments for that run. And I never read much after that. I never moved very fast either. But I had a terrible time in Texas. But I never conceived that I might be an alcoholic. If I were an alcoholic, I wouldn't need electric shock treatments. And I wouldn't need all this crap from these idiots. And what happened to me in the state of Texas that summer, the next year, I can't explain how wonderful it was. The state of Texas decided that if you have committed someone to the nut house, and if you agree to take care of that person, you can get him out. And God, that warmed up my letters home. "Hi, honey, thinking about you every minute of the day and night." And pretty soon I worked her over she finally came down and got me out. And one thing I had learned to tell people, I have finally learned my lesson. I got a good job on the basis that I'd learned my lesson. I went to work in Dallas for the largest advertising agency in the South, Tracy Locke. And I worked on the Elsie Delmer ads. And my problem has always been that I get a little bored with it after a while. And one day they called me in after a couple months, and the manager said to me, "Clancy, you really write well." I said, "Thank you very much." He said, "But the other day we had the chairman of Fritos here, and he walked around our agency, and he said, you were drunk in your office." And he said, "He gives us $10 million a year in billing. You give us nothing. So guess who we're going to fire?" "Me?" He says, "You really write well. I made you a big check here." And I went home. "And we called your wife yesterday and told her you were being fired today." And I thought that was the unkindest cut of all, to know that she could get all prepared for me. So I got out of that nut house. And I went downtown and cashed my big severance check, rented a room in a motel, and made some new friends. And we partied for a few days. Then I had to go home when I ran out of money. And there was nobody home. And I looked at the window. There was no furniture. They were gone. And I noticed all my clothes were piled in a heap on the front porch. And a little note on top said, "We can't take it anymore. We're leaving for good." That's the end of my family. And all these things had happened to me. And I didn't know what to make of it. And I thought, I'd go to meetings. I went to meetings every day for 2 years because there was nothing I could do. My sponsor would pick me up. I'd hear him talk. But I came to the conclusion, but if I'm not an alcoholic, what could I do? How could I stop this guy from giving me this sermon every night on the way back to the club mission? So I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll ask him some questions. And he's such a self-centered boob that he'll take the whole trip back answering my question. So the next night we were coming home from West LA. I said, "Bob, you know, I really admire your program. You are an object lesson to me. But one question, you know, I'm not really, I want to tell you, I'm not really an alcoholic. And I've thought a lot about it. What my problem is, I'm too sensitive. I feel things too intensely. It's almost as though I didn't get a coating over me for my emotions, and I felt things immediately and it hurt." And I said, I'm not even an alcoholic. I'm just a neurotic misfit." He said, "Well, tell me again, but why you think so?" And I told him before, that when I'm sober, I get thinking a lot about my feelings and how I hurt and how people treat me and how people act as though I'm not worthy. And it makes me crazy. And eventually I get to hate my surroundings. It really is just, I hate him and hate him. And he says, "Well, that's not unusual." I said, "What do you think my problem is, Bob? You're a smart guy. What do you think my problem is?" He said, "I think you're an alcoholic." I said, "How could I be an alcoholic when my number one problem is not alcohol?" He said, "Kid, you haven't listened very much over the years, apparently. But alcoholics aren't people whose number one problem is alcohol. Alcoholics are people whose answer is alcohol. And the problem with the curse of alcoholism is not that you can't quit drinking. Everybody in this crowd has quit drinking at one time or another. If that really worked, we'd all be home today." But he said, everybody quits from time to time. But the curse of alcoholism is that sooner or later, your perception changes, and what used to be pleasant is crappy, and pretty soon you can't stand it. And the curse of alcoholism is that you gotta drink. You gotta drink to stand it. Jesus, what do you mean my problem isn't alcohol? He said, everybody will tell you your problem is alcohol, and once you get off it, you'll be all right, but that's not correct. Getting off of alcohol is deadly for alcoholics unless something happens. That's what AA is about. It's doing something after you get sober, not to get sober. Only the 7th word of the 12 steps is alcohol. Never mentioned again, never mentioned by anybody. I thought, Jesus, I never thought of that. And the next day I was walking around, sitting in the club and thinking, what if that's true? What if that's true, what he says? That maybe I might be an alcoholic, because I certainly get to a point I need a drink. And I thought, well, I'll just act a while as though it's true. And little by little I did what he said, and I got better. It's an odd thing to find yourself taking actions you don't believe in. Shake hands with these assholes. Why? And on, just do it. Just do it. And he said, you've got to take the steps now. And I said, I can't return to God. I can't take the steps because I can't return to God. I'm not going to. He killed my little boy. That son of a bitch will get me in hell, but he won't get me before there. To hell with him. He said, well, you're very fortunate, young man. Nothing in AA ever says you have to return to God. It says you come to believe in something. You come from where you are, and you slowly come to believe in something. Can't you believe there's a loving power called God who wants to help you? I said, no. He said, can't you believe in AA? I said, not really. He says, do you think I'm doing better than you are? I said, yes, you are. He said, congratulations. I'm your new higher power. And I could accept that because I knew he was trying to help me. But I accepted him as a higher power, and therefore I could do the things that talks about a higher power. And after a while, I got a little job, and I got fired, got another little job, got fired, got another little job, got fired, never got out of that damn abandoned car. I had to shave in the club with cold water. Oh, God, that's tough. And finally, I started to do pretty good. And I got a job, and I held on to it. And he said, you know, kid, you're doing pretty good. But now it's time to write your inventory. I'm never going to write. Writing your inventory to me is just giving someone the power to put you in jail. I said, no. And I got a job as a dishwasher at the Gaiety Delicatessen. And I lasted until 10 o'clock the first night. Then I noticed the busboys were bringing in more dishes than the waitresses were taking out. So I knew they were getting them in other restaurants to embarrass me. So I just piled them up. Incidentally, this is being translated into Spanish. I want to give our Spanish friends something in Spanish. Once you've been in the Juarez jail, you'll speak Spanish automatically. Yo soy el maestro de los locos en Chihuahua. Usually they say, cabrón, cabrón. I think that means welcome in Spanish. But I got fired that night. And I went back to the club. It was 10:30 or so. And everybody had gone home from the meeting. Just Sullivan was sitting there. I said, Sullivan, Jesus, I got fired as a dishwasher. Guys that got sober when I did got cars, they got girlfriends, and I can't hold a job as a dishwasher, and I'm back in that damn car again. I said, I might as well be drunk. He said, you're right. You think that's right? He said, well, kid, there's 180 members of this club. About 168 think you're bad news, and they want us to get rid of you. There's 12 people that like you, and they defend you every day. If you would get drunk, you might make 12 people feel bad, but you make 168 people really feel good. I thought, I won't do that. I don't like him anyway. So I stayed sober. I said, give me some paper. I'm going to go in the back room. I went in the back room, and I wrote my inventory. Not the way it says in the book. I just poured it out. If you're having a little difficulty with your inventory, wait till you're really feeling bad. When you feel good, it's almost impossible. Well, I guess I did a few silly things, but I'm more than made up for it with the good works I've done. When you really feel bad, it's here. I'm a dirty son of a bitch, and here's why. And watch the teardrops form on the paper. And I put down things I'd forgotten entirely. Carnal thoughts I had in the third grade, for God's sake. Not like the speaker we had last night who had carnal thoughts about a nun, or this afternoon. I had carnal thoughts about other little girls in the third grade. And I screwed so many people around, and I hurt people, I deserted people, stepped on people. I got to be very successful by stepping on people. I got all done. It was just like sort of thrown up on paper. And I said, Sully, I've taken my inventory. He said, okay, we're going to close, go to bed. And the next morning, my sponsor called me. He says, I understand you wrote your inventory. I thought that Sullivan, that snitch, just called and told him. I said, how do you know that? He says, we sponsors know those things. And so he says, be out in the corner at 6:30 tonight and have the paper with you. And he pulled up, and I didn't jump in the car, and he had a bunch of flashlights. And we drove along the ocean to Oxnard, 40 miles away. And I read this thing to him. And oh God, it read worse than I remembered. I thought, he's going to make me get out of the car and walk back to Los Angeles. We got near Oxnard. I said, that's all, Bob. He said, is that all you've written? Oh, yeah. He leaned over and said, that's the best thing you've done since you got sober, kid. And I said, thought it was. But it did help me. It helped me a lot with a lot of my approaches to life. The next big thing my sponsor wanted me to do was make amends. I have a lot of amends. I wrote 3 pages of amends, but the top 2 were one being expelled from the University of Wisconsin after graduation. It's hard to do. I graduated, but I had to go to summer school to pick up a class I'd missed, and I got expelled doing that for kicking open a door and screwing a girl to the faculty lounge. Not my fault. She lured me on. And he said, you have to go back and make amends to that university. And you have to go back and make amends to in Dallas, where you got a pickup truck and you smashed it up and left it on the roadside of the road. So I said, how am I going to go back there? I got no money. He says, you're working now. I'll get you a little job. Save all your money. And I saved my money for 3 months till I had bus fare to Texas, El Paso, I guess it was. And I went down to El Paso and I found this guy. I said, Doug, I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous and I wrecked your truck and I'm very sorry. And I want to make it right. And I don't have any money now, but I will have money and I'll send you some money. He said, what are you doing in Alcoholics Anonymous? I said, well, I guess I'm a drunk. What did you think made me do those things? He said, I thought you were an asshole then. I think you're an asshole now. I thought, I'm certainly glad I saved all that money to hear that. I got back to, but at least I'd made my amends to him. And I did send him the money over after a while. But he wanted me to go back to the University of Wisconsin now and explain to them I was sorry. And the guy that had been the dean who expelled me was now in charge of everybody. And so I went back to see my folks in Wisconsin to show them I was sober. And I went down to the university. I said, I'd like to see the president or the chancellor, please. And the girl, I heard her go and say, Clancy Imislund is here. And he said, tell him I'm gone. So she said, I'm sorry he's gone. I thought, huh. So I went back the next year to visit my folks. I did it the 3 times. Finally got done. The 3rd time I heard him say, okay, send him in. I'll get rid of him for good. He said, what the hell are you doing here, Clancy? I just came back to tell you that I'm sorry. I know how much you helped me along the way. And I drank an awful lot in college when I got back from the war. And I want to make it right to you. He said, well, that's very interesting, because you did screw up an awful lot. And I covered for you as long as I could, but I couldn't cover anymore. And he said, I don't know what you plan to do about it. What are you doing now? I said, well, my family moved back 2 years ago. My wife and children, after I was sober 5 years, they moved back. And if your family ever comes back, I want you to notice something. My wife who knew me well, whenever I went to a meeting and came home, she'd smell my breath. She thought I was going out drinking because I'd promised so many times. And he said, you want your family moved back and you're living with them now? I said, yes. We have another little boy. And he said, that's remarkable. That's remarkable. I'm very glad to hear it. And he dismissed me. And I'd made amends to him. And a few months later, I got a letter from his secretary. Hello, this is the Chancellor's secretary. You'll be glad to know that the Chancellor is retiring this year. Retiring? Yes. But we're going to have an alumni luncheon in Los Angeles in December. And unfortunately, the man who was in charge of setting it up died. We have no place to go. Now, the Chancellor knows that he and you aren't close, but maybe you could find a place. I said, okay, I'll call you back. And I called her back in a couple hours. I said, how about the Coconut Grove, most glamorous place in America, where the screen stars go every night? And she said, oh my God, that would be wonderful. I didn't want to tell her I sponsored the manager, that's how we got it. And they came out, and I said, on one condition, that I get invited. She said, I'll call you back. She called me back and said, he said you can come. And I remember that Sunday, having a cup of coffee with the Chancellor of the University of Wisconsin. And he said, what's this I hear about you? You are helping people. I said, yeah, that's right. Because the one thing I haven't said yet, when I was 7 years sober, someone called me and asked me if I knew anyone who would like to become director of the Midnight Mission, that place that threw me out. I said no, because the director had suddenly died. But then I talked to my sponsor about it, and he thought it might be a good idea to go down and help him for a little while. So I said, I'll help you until you get something going. So on February 1st, 1974, I went to work at the Midnight Mission. And I straightened them out pretty good. So much so that they never found anybody to help me. And I've been there ever since. I've been the managing director of the Midnight Mission for 43 years. It's really not that wonderful, but thank you for the applause. I told him that I'm the manager of the mission now in Skid Row. He said, I can't believe that. That's unlike you. You're the most self-centered person I've ever known. And I don't believe you're doing anything for anybody. So I said, you want to go see it? I said, yeah, I wanted to see it in all its pristine purity. Don't call them and let them know we're coming. So we drove over there on a Sunday afternoon. We just washed the whole place as we do every Sunday morning, sparkling clean. People on the sidewalk, old dying guys saying, hi, Mr. Clancy. Hi, Mr. Clancy. We went into my office. I had some awards that won on my office. He said, this is the most remarkable thing since Christ turned water into wine. I can't believe this. He said, this is remarkable. I'm glad I saw it. You jumped in his car and away went. I'd made amends to him. But the next year, in November, I got a call saying, the Chancellor is going to retire at the next graduation. And a strange thing, he's named you a Distinguished Alumnus of the Year, and he wants you to come back and talk at commencement. I said, you bet your ass I will. I didn't say that. I said, yes, thank you very much. So I took all my kids and went back to the commencement. My mother and father were still alive, and they cried. That was nice. I was their only child. And it was really good amend, I thought. My children profited from it. I have 3 daughters in AA in the 27 years sober now, and they always call back to that going to see that graduation as one of the great miracles of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I went back there, and I cried afterwards. I couldn't believe it. It expunged that nonsense. And only because I believed I was an alcoholic. If you're new tonight, let me tell you one thing. I've sponsored a lot of people over the years. I've never known any new person who really believed they were alcoholic. They believe, well, maybe I drink too much, but I'm too sensitive. I'm not an alcoholic. And you got to stay around here and listen to all these people talk. If you heard Bob and Sheldon yesterday, it helped you along the way. To come to understand the nature of this illness is such that it's not what you thought it was. Eventually, people come to understand that they're alcoholics when they're in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've lived in Los Angeles now for 50-some years. And I own a house. And the greatest secret I know about sobriety is that you have to, as Bob said again this afternoon, you must go to the meetings. You must extend your hand. You must help people, help people, help people. And you feel very good afterwards. I'm so glad that I became an alcoholic after I was sober several months. And I became an alcoholic. And looking back, I can't imagine how I ever fought it so long. But that's what AA is about. AA is designed of one alcoholic talking to another alcoholic. Bill Wilson talking to Dr. Bob. Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob talking to Ed or Bill D up in the hospital. And it's always the same. And it's the only amazing thing you'll find in AA is that today, throughout AA, there are little pockets of people who want to change it. They want to change the book. They want to change the need to be an alcoholic. And you might think about that. Why would you have to be an alcoholic to be there? Think how much it would help people. And there used to be an organization called the Washingtonians. Just 100 years, started 100 years before we did. And after 5 years of working with alcoholics, they had 100,000 people. AA after 5 years didn't even have 5,000. And they got together, they said, if we're able to help drinkers, we should be able to help people with other problems. Maybe narcotics, not like today, heroin and cocaine, but laudanum and opium, which people used then. And maybe we should help people with mental problems and people with emotional problems. And maybe we're wasting our time just doing those with the drunks again and again and again. And 3 years later, they were extinct to all intents and purposes. And they all died drunk on the street. And I had a book home written by one of the members in 1861. He said, I don't know what happened. We were doing so well, but pretty soon you couldn't find anyone who wanted to go call in a drunk. They just wanted to help exotic people. And one of the great problems we have here is to understand the nature of Alcoholics Anonymous, which makes it work. There's a lot of organizations which say that almost the same words we use, but it is identification. Alcoholic, the most glib speaker in the world talking about shooting up and sniffing up. I listen to it, but I don't understand it. What I need is some dummy up there saying, oh, I drank for a long time and my life is screwed up. And I'm sober now for 5 weeks and Jim is my sponsor and he's a tough son-of-a-bitch and I'm glad to be here. Yeah, that's what I want to hear. That's what I want to hear. And that's why in the late 1950s, all these things happened around the time I got sober. A guy named Jim Willis, whose wife stayed sober, the first woman to make 50 years, he was a gambler and an alcoholic. And he would bring gamblers to AA, and they'd say, I don't want to hear those juicers talk anymore. We're sick. And he wrote to New York and got permission to be the first one to use the 12 steps outside of Alcoholics Anonymous. He founded Narcotics Anonymous. And then some woman in West LA founded Food Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous. Then some guys out by the ocean founded Cocaine Anonymous. And they're all use the same AA data, but they provide one thing. They provide identification for the guy that's there. I never really understood the nature of how that difficult that was. When I was about 2 years sober, I was talking at the AA club one day, still no front teeth, but I was talking about obsessions. I happen to be an authority on obsessions, not the recovery from them, just the obsessions. And I started, and after the meeting, a kind of a portly woman came up and said, "Boy, that's why I never heard anybody talk like that before. Would you mind going over and talk to my ladies at Overeaters Anonymous? We have a new group starting on Olympic Boulevard. Can you come over next Sunday and talk about obsessions?" I said, "Sure." I weighed about 130 pounds. I didn't mind. Out over there, there were about 10 fat women sitting around the table. But I told them about obsessions, and they understood. And then I sat down. I thought, I've really done a nice thing. But then they identified. Woman over here, her son just had his 10th birthday, and he was at a military school in Long Beach. Her husband went down to get him in the morning, and she had a cake, 2-layer cake, and she tasted it, and tasted it again. By the time I got back, the cake was all eaten up. And I didn't say anything because I'm a nice guy, but I want to say, Jesus, that's a hell of a way to treat people. And over here, a woman said, "I love ice cream. I eat ice cream half a gallon at a time. And my husband's a physician. I'll wait till he goes to work in the morning, and then I go down to the drugstore and get ice cream, and I love it." And I didn't say anything because I'm a nice guy. I wanted to say, no wonder you're fat, for Christ's sake. Everybody eat that much ice cream and get fat. But my winner was over here. She said she ate till she couldn't eat anymore, then put her finger down her throat and puked it all up so she could eat some more. And I was shocked. I thought to myself, don't bother shaking hands with me after the meeting. Yeah. But I thought to myself later, what's the difference? Alcohol did not do for them what it did for me. Food did not do for me what it did for them. It's continual obsession of the mind relieved by an outside object. And you go to these functions now, probably the biggest and most successful of all the non-AA meetings is the Gamblers Anonymous. Everywhere in the world where there's gambling, Gamblers Anonymous flourishes. And Narcotics Anonymous has a more difficult time because a lot of those guys would rather be cool than sober. Come on, man, chill. I don't want to hear that shit, you know. But some of them stay, some of them make it. Cocaine Anonymous, very successful. But every one of them is based on one thing. One person getting identification from somebody else is, my God. Because that's why that's so important. Because we are asked to do things that don't make sense. We are asked to do things, making inventory, making amends, all this crap. What's the purpose of that? But if you believe that the person that you're listening to really understands how you're feeling, if that identification is there, you will do it. That's the great fact of sponsorship, I think. With sponsorship, you have become responsible to some other force outside yourself. But A continues its way, and we don't change things. There's a feminist group in New York who wants to change the 12 steps to say, we believe in God as we understand God, not as we understand Him, because that's too parochial. There's a group in Toronto currently suing AA. They're the architects, alcoholics, and atheists. And the central officer will not list them because they're not AA. And they've sued AA. In California, I knew a guy, Chuck, who was sober as long as I was, and he had a little group called the Tender Loving Care Club, and he changed it, and he had 12 steps. He took God out of every one of them, and the central office refused to list them. So he changed the name to Synanon and made himself $1 million. He worked with alcoholics. But all over the world, what we have here, this book is a miracle. Why would he call it a miracle? Because the man who wrote it did not know enough to write it. He had no background in psychology or abnormal psychology. He was a loser drunk. And he wrote a book that has, in the last 82 years, changed more people like you and me than all other therapies combined in mankind's history. So if you're one of those people that sat down in their first year and you don't have a sponsor, get your ass in gear, get a sponsor. Find a sponsor, get to meetings, see who you can help, and all of a sudden you'll be sober longer. And I'm very glad to be here tonight, safe. And Bob talked about the 9th and 11th step today. Every night now, over the years, I've come to believe in that implicitly. It says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we talk about praying only for knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry it out. Not praying for that job or that girl or that situation. Pray for knowledge of God's will for you. When I went to bed last night, the last thing I said was, help me to understand what kind of a man I should be. Because I'm not quite sure yet to do even better. And I prayed that with God's help, I might be able to do it. So all I'm saying to you, if you're new tonight or if you're upset, when you go to bed tonight, let me tell you something to do. Pray for knowledge of God's will for you and thank Him because you are safe and sane and sober. That's the gift we give you. If you're in this football field today and you don't have a helmet on, you are safe. And if your head is making you crazy, you are sane. And there's no doubt about it, you're sober. And being safe and sane and sober is the greatest gift we give you. Thank you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
remote control is connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.